Hello. Bienvenidos to the second TED Talk, so-called TED Talk. We started last time with about teaching, and today we hear about from Monica
Yuzak.
I always had problems with the name. And some people also ask me what TED stands for. It's technology, education, and design. So this is something like TED Talk. And applause for Monica.
I'm going to open with a poem that I really love, and it'll become more clear after. It's called Never Still, and it's by Patti Smith. I don't know if any of you remember her. She was a 60s rocker.
She's still around.
She is still around, and she composed this poem recently. Okay. Travel is its own book. Images we have captured in film, in memory, form its leaves that when turned reveal the story of a life. We long to add new pages. We long to explore. We long for new sights, new noise, unknown faces, unentered doors, a pyramid, a towering spiral, an ancient gaze. The muscular history of past civilizations, the face of justice, we long to return. We do not look back, we revisit. Places once trod in a new light, new shadows forming on architecture, on winding streets. We long to cross welcoming bridges, connecting sea and sky and city. We are ready to break through barriers, to don our coats, to gather provisions, to reclaim motion, to see with new eyes, the familiar and the strange, new pages for our story, the unceasing turning of the leaves of life. By Patti Smith. Now, if you turn the next slide, I have taken that poem and part of the title for my book that I have started during the pandemic and is now finished and will be printed soon. And it's called Never Still. I like to leave the questions till the end, just because I have a lot of material I want to cover, and if that's okay with everybody. If you can do the next picture.
Could we just
Oh, you can go.
speak your bio for me?
Can you just go back?
Yeah, she.
Okay. So I was born in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which is in the middle of Saskatchewan, at the beginning of the forest part of Saskatchewan, so in the forest. And it was a very provincial pulp mill town. I would say we came from a lower middle class family. My father was a teacher. He had 5 daughters, Monica, Myra, Marlene, Maxine, and Marianne. And I was the eldest. And we lived in our little house from the day I was born to the day I left for university. We didn't have money to travel. We didn't see much more than our little town, and that's where I sort of thought the world stopped and ended. Then in grade 3, my teacher, Miss Cameron, went to the Bahamas. She came back to school and did a slideshow for us grade 3 students, and I saw black people for the first time on pictures. And it freaked me out, it blew my mind. I thought, really? How could it be? And I also saw women carrying pineapples on their heads. And I thought, the world is bigger than Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And it was kind of that was the beginning of me deciding I was going to see it all. So I left home, looking in the rear view mirror at my mom up to here in housework, and said, it's not for me. I'm going to do way more than what she has done. And they gave us a very secure and loving home. And it was kind of a good springboard for me to leave. I felt very confident and unafraid to explore the world. So move it a bit forward, and my father, who was a Polish immigrant, wanted to be a doctor all his life. His family didn't have money to send him to medical school, so guess what? He pinned all his hopes on me. And in a very silent kind of way, got me into medical school. It's in the book. I'm not going to tell you how it happened, but I did get to medical school. I did complete medical school. I married the high school quarterback when I was 18, and I was a cheerleader, so you can see what that kind of picture looked like. And then I got pregnant, had the baby. A week after I delivered the baby, I decided I was ending my marriage because of the cradle that we had created together. I just knew we couldn't bring a baby up in that mess. So I thought I'd be stronger as a single parent than we would be as a couple. I took him to court. I got a court. The decision was I could take my daughter out of the country, despite the fact that most of the time it's better for the child to be with both parents. The judge said, go. And so you can imagine how that went over in certain circles. So here we are. I'm a single parent, a new medical degree in my pocket, a little baby in my arms, and I head off to Papua New Guinea. And that's the next slide.
Why not?
So for those of you that may not know, Papua New Guinea is composed of 400 islands in the Melanesian archipelago. And if you can see that little red dot saying Rabaul in the middle, the island is called East New Britain Island, and I was about 15 minutes away from Rabaul in a place called Kokopo, which was a German mission run by nuns who had come there during the Second World War and believed they would never leave or see their homeland again. So they created this mission, and that's where my daughter Annika and I end up. So, lots of adventures there. I'm just going to quickly show you the pictures of Papua New Guinea before I start the first story. So that's me with some nurses at the hospital. I was 25. Next. This is Sister Maria, who was the anesthesiologist. She'd never attended one day of medical school. She was excellent. She just learned by practice. And that's Annika, my daughter. That's Sister Teresa. She was the head of obstetrics. This was Ruth, an Australian, who did some radiology, very simple radiology for us. And that's Matt from the US. He was our microbiologist at Bolts, and there's little Annika again. I'd love to take all these pictures in the same day. More of the same. And we had little babies that, if their mothers died or they weren't thriving, they wouldn't take them back to the village. So they left them at the hospital. So we always had a little crib full of little babies that Annika would come and play with.
Like real dolls.
This is a little guy. There was this thing that was called worm belly. They get so many worms in their belly that they would look like this. And sometimes they'd actually get obstructed, so we'd have to surgically open the intestines to get all the worms out. Next. More. Next. Mom and baby. There's Annika. Eating peanuts. Grandmother and baby. Village. So in these days, like it was 81, no tourists. No, there were expats that had owned plantation or managed plantations, and there was a few religious, and then the hospital and the volunteers. But it was a really interesting 3-year experience. So I'll just read you a little excerpt from one of the stories from my book. It's called A Teaching Moment. Shh. I motioned the nurses to gather around the bed of a woman in late pregnancy. Her blood pressure is 200 over 120, is that right? 4 brown faces with full moon eyes nodded grimly. Decla, did you test her urine this morning, I asked? Yes, doctor, 3+ protein, she whispered as if it was her fault. Rosaria, press firmly with your thumb above her ankle. What do you notice? They all watched an indentation form in the dough-like tissue that stayed after she moved away. That is pitting edema, I told them. The patient's mother was, that wound is really bothering me. Could you tell her to be quiet?
That's a little kid.
That is pitting edema, I told them. The patient's mother was placing cold compresses on her daughter's forehead and catching her vomit in a bowl when she turned her head to the side. Nurses, this is pre-eclampsia. We must manage her condition quickly, or if she develops eclampsia, she and the life of her pickaninny will be in danger. We rolled Fetia, the pregnant woman, into a private room where it was quiet. A cooling fan whirred softly above our heads. I started an IV and administered an antihypertensive while the nurses followed the protocol to prepare for an emergency C-section. Most importantly, the severity of my tone gathered all the nurses around me. We must be extremely quiet. Any loud sounds or sudden movements could result in Fetia having a seizure. I looked from face to face to be sure each nurse was looking into my eyes and soaking up this vital information. At this moment, I heard a grating sound, clackety clink clink, like a bicycle chain off its sprocket. Then the overhead fan flipped off its mooring and helicoptered down to land with a kerbang on Fetia's pregnant belly. I'm not proud to tell you that my first thought was of Monty Python and their many crew and equipment goofs. A millisecond later I shouted, "Get Sister Maria, run, move Fetia into the OR, now!" We had to quickly deliver the baby as Fetia was now in great danger. Sister Maria calmly stabilized the patient's blood pressure and put her to sleep. Luckily, the flying fan did not tip her into seizures. I performed the C-section and a tiny female infant, less than 5 pounds, with a boisterous cry, was placed in a crib nearby, the mom quietly snoring. My back was dripping sweat, and only when Mom and Pickaninny were safe did my legs weaken and my hands begin to shake. I performed this operation several times before, but never in an emergency where every second could mean the difference between life and death. I examined the new arrival. All her parts were present, were working well, her color was good. Her wet hair made little pin curls all over her skull. She opened her eyes and her chin quivered. "Yes, little one, I'm tired too. It's been a long day and it's nice to meet you." She was gorgeous. Thecla wrapped her up like an Australian sausage roll and presented her to her lap mama, grandma. Later that night, I walked across the moonlit compound from my house to the hospital to check on Fetia and her child. The still night was alive with the sound of cicadas. I left my flip-flops at the maternity ward entrance, tipped out and saw that Fetia was stable and sleeping. Lap Mama fed the baby with her little finger dipped in milk, which was given to her by other lactating women on the ward. Odd, I had never seen this before. Usually mothers and their newborns were inseparable in love. I would investigate tomorrow. So Annika and I had 3 years there, and she grew from an 18-month-old infant to about a 3-year-old, I guess. And when it was time to leave, I went back to Saskatchewan, where my family was, and did a little bit of anesthesia training so I could do simple anesthetics, and then got a job in the Northwest Territories. One more. So you can see Saskatchewan is where I was from, and I was about here on the map. And Yellowknife is one of the territories of Canada, so it's right there on Great Slave Lake. And it's the referral center for all of the Arctic, the Northwest Territories. And anything that we couldn't handle, we would send to Edmonton in Alberta. I'll just show you a few pictures from that time.
Summer.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, it will.
Yep.
Wow.
Annika's now bigger. This is one of the first pictures I took from our window when we arrived. Everything was so like that. That was my nurse Judy. That was an Inuit woman and her baby right after the birth. That was Annika's babysitter. This is when the Pope came to Yellowknife to visit. This was a tug of war. Annika's 1, 2, 3, 4, and her blue coat and pink hat. That was after a cross-country ski race. Yeah. So in Yellowknife, I had a maternity practice, a full-time office practice. I was doing anesthetics, I was doing minor surgery, working in the emergency room, and being a single parent. So it was really a full-on place. And I'll just read you a little bit about when we arrived. Thump, thump, thump on the door. I opened it and saw a massive man filling the door frame. Yes, I stood between him and Annika. You looking for a babysitter? I saw long gray braids, a baseball cap turned backwards, and arms and neck covered in tattoos. I cleared my throat and said firmly, yes. Well, here I am, he announced with a faint sparkle in his eye and his chin pointing up. I paused, took a deep breath, and with an even voice said, Annika, this is your babysitter. What choice did I have? On Friday, we arrived in Yellowknife, found an apartment on Saturday, and I put a babysitter wanted sign in the foyer Saturday night. It was now Sunday afternoon, and I was beginning work the next morning. And Annika would also start grade 1 French immersion at Mildred Hall. And as strange as it may sound, I got a good vibe from this guy. Ian, Annika's new babysitter, was a gold miner from Timmins, Northern Ontario. Betty, his wife, was also a miner and hailed from Newfoundland. They moiled for gold at the giant mine just north of town. They lived directly below us in an apartment that looked very lived in. I immediately noticed the overflowing ashtrays and the pungent air quality. Tea-stained white mugs on the Formica kitchen table, and a big comfy leather couch and 2 reclining chairs facing a ginormous television. The unremarkable art, a river scene triptych, had clearly been chosen to match the green couch. After I got to know Betty much better, she told me that she planned to use Ian's skin for a lampshade after he died, as they had broken the bank on his tats. And this would certainly bring a much-needed color accent to the decor. We gathered around Ian and Betty's kitchen table for our first sit-down conversation. Ian intuited my question and answered before I asked it. No, Bets and I don't drink alcohol or do drugs, and we don't eat anything green neither. So if you can live with that, the kid is welcome anytime, day or night. Someone is always home. Wow, so flexible. But would I be able to accept his standards? So he was the babysitter, I was the doctor, they moiled for gold, Annika went to school. There was nothing like internet, cell phones, texts, emails, and somehow we all made it work. I don't know how. In this day we demand, the cell phones are like keep us all connected. We didn't have any of that, but somehow we did it. I want to read you another story. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by those who moil for gold. That's watered service from the cremation of Saint-Magui, if anybody knows it. Dr. Hadley, a surgeon and the owner of the medical arts clinic in Yellowknife, hired me to work a full-time practice, including obstetrics. I was also rostered at the New Franklin Hospital for the emergency department, anesthesia, and minor surgery. We were the referral center for the north, as I told you, and emergencies dropped on us from helicopters. My working life felt like third world medicine with first world expectations. The pace was fast and relentless. I remember delivering an anesthetic for an obstetric patient requiring an emergency C-section and getting a beeper message telling me that one of my patients in the ER was seizing. Also, it happened to be Valentine's Day and Annika was all dressed up for her party and she was already raped. I sent an SOS to Ian and he kindly escorted Annika to the party. A sign that read Annika's room hung on the door of Betty and Ian's spare bedroom. Ian bought Annika a full-size Pac-Man console as he felt the game would contribute to her education. He also bought her a Disney princess duvet and pillow set with a matching bedside lamp. On any given day, Annika fell asleep at home and woke up at Ian's or vice versa. She rolled with the way things were and thrived on the chocolate pancakes he made for her. This arrangement allowed me to work regular hours, everybody to do their thing, that required a lot of flexibility, respect, and a good dose of humor. So we stayed in Yellowknife for 3 years. We saw midnight sun where there was no darkness in the summer and no light in the winter. And it was a very group of eclectic kind of misfits running from something or running to something, that pot of gold. So it was a really kind of a cowboy kind of atmosphere. And it was really hard work. So after 3 years, I ran back to Saskatoon and was thinking about what to do next. It was clear to me that Saskatoon was not my place. It just felt cold, dark, and I just was waiting for the next thing. And the next thing happened to be a series of coincidences that got me on the telephone to a woman in New Zealand who said she was looking for someone interested in home birthing. And I said, well, I'm interested. And she hired me before I could tell her that I had never seen one. But she hired me on the phone. So we were off to our next, I have no pictures of New Zealand because my pictures are in albums at home. They weren't on the computer. But this is the last story I'm going to read to you. And I'm hoping it's good. So I was thrown into the home birthing movement, and there was always 2 midwives and 1 doctor present at every birth. And so I had to learn quickly, and the midwives schooled me up in things that I never learned at medical school, that's for sure. I learned unconventional birthing methods not mentioned in medical school, outside-the-box methods. Some involved ropes to turn a baby presenting breech. A well-oiled Greek salad and sex were prescribed to initiate labor, and we used acupressure points on the sternum to slow it down. Raspberry tea ice cubes were frozen in advance to stem postpartum bleeding. We taught patients how to prevent perineal tears and ways to heal without stitches should a tear occur. I studied hypnosis at Auckland University to help prepare my patients for labor, and I used trance for analgesia when pain management was needed. We supported women who wanted to deliver their babies underwater, in flower gardens, and in rooms filled with fairy godmothers. Classical music was popular, as was kirtan chanting and incense. One night in the wee hours, I arrived at a vast open space warehouse where the father, a Tongan DJ, mixed house music while the laboring woman screamed. Once I was summoned after midnight to Centre Point, a commune on the outskirts of Auckland. A laboring woman was in a squat position on a stage, and her partner was rubbing her naked body with oils. I tried to get near her. I wanted to examine the woman for dilation and listen to the baby's heartbeat. No, no, let her be, said a gray-haired elder. Her body holds the wisdom of all the women in her line who came before. You called me, I said gently. I'm responsible for the outcome here. Give me a few minutes, and if all is well, I will sit quietly on the sidelines. The community, a large group of all ages, was on the floor below in various stages of undress. They swayed and hummed in time to the laboring woman's contractions. When I examined her, I heard sighs and finger snapping. In support or protest, I was not sure. She was fully dilated, and the baby's heartbeat was strong, and the whole room gathered to push. The father delivered the child and separated his baby from the placenta with fishing line and a hunting knife. All was well. The uterus contracted beautifully after the birth. I was surprised to discover that this was her first baby. This scenario was the ultimate in community support. I realized then that worry, stress, and fear were often determinants in labor that did not progress well. Although my participation was minimal, I was wet with sweat and relieved that the drama was over. I drove home as the orange-red sun appeared on the horizon. So we also stayed in New Zealand for 3 years, and Annika and I, she'd get kind of squirrely when I would move, you know, she'd have to leave her friends, her room, so we'd sort that out, and I promised her that when she turned 13, we would stay where we were so she could do high school in one place. And that happened to be Vancouver. And so I kept my promise, and she did complete her high school there. And in high school, in Vancouver, I worked in a very wealthy area of town for some time, and I worked on the Lower East Side for a time with very marginalized people with few resources, and discovered that you could also travel without moving city to city, you know, traveling by seeing life in sort of a more open way, and I was quite content, but I always planned to start traveling again when Annika was finished her high school. But then I met Eve, and I got stuck there. So that was a long time ago, and I just retired in January of last year. And I feel that I'm kind of okay with being retired, but all of my dreams are telling me that I'm unsettled about it, because I dream about being in the office, the nurse is not treating me right, I'm in the operating room, so I'm not sure what's really happening, but I feel okay. And that's my TED Talk. Any questions?